We pitched the idea of this gory, you chop people in half and their whole body splits and blood splurts everywhere. And Dave Lang's goes, that's a fucking terrible idea. And Chelsea just goes, we should do wrestling. And in that moment, at that inception point, what if you could do a elbow drop off a 40-story building? What if you were like basically superheroes wrestling this massive city? And so that was so cool because from that moment, we just started jamming and throwing ideas down. We're like, what does that look like? What does it look like? What was that? Next morning, I wake up and Craig and I started, working on the design doc or the concept doc. And I run into Dave later on. I was like, dude, we're going to build a pitch. And he just looks at me, he's like, it was a dumb idea. Adam, boys. Hello, Barn. How are you? I'm good. Good, dude. We're at Gamescom. We are at Gamescom, and we're in the quietest area of Gamescom. Yeah, which is your bedroom. Which is my bedroom, which is appropriate, I think. Good. How's the Gamescom experience? Good. Busy, but great. Like, seeing a lot of great people. I just went off the show floor, and seeing those thousands of people out there, just like, it takes me back to how I felt when I fell in love with this industry too. It's easy, I think, for us to look at that swarms of people and be like, God, I can't believe they're in my way. But to sort of take a moment to appreciate that they're the reason why consumers. Yeah. Well, the players. They play. We call them consumers.
Let's not call them consumers. Awesome. Well, this is the Creative Collaboration podcast. We're trying to figure out how the hell you actually managed to build a successful game, a game that sells. Even though you need so many different disciplines that inherently come with different personalities. Just a lot of different cultures and that stuff. So that's what we're trying to sort of drill in on. Cool. But can you start by telling us a little bit about how you got into the industry and how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I was a kid, I got a gift, I think probably when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I got a TRS-80, which was like a little Tandy keyboard that you could make you'd plug into your TV and you could write code. And there was some sort of text-based adventures that I started to build. And I realized I started getting this monthly magazine where they had a little source code on the back that if you copied to do it, there was a little game it would play. And then I always write the game and then I would just start modding it and changing it. Realizing I was really bad at coding, but I was really talented at just changing colors, right? Which is always, it was like I got in the basic version of it. So my love for games, through and through, started messing around with 3D Studio Max. I was lucky that my dad had his own business, so he always had a computer, and I always be like, we got to upgrade it, right? Well, 286, we got to go 386. 4616, we got to go 4650 with 66. So every time the Pentium, so really big into PC games back in the day. Interestingly, didn't have a console until the NES. My brother and I saved up to get the Nintendo Entertainment System, and we got the bundle with Duck Hunt and what was it? The robot game. Gyromite? Oh, Gyromite came in, but it had Rob the Robot as well. It's like the whole deluxe package. Anyway, so that was the passion. And then one day, one of my friends that I worked with at McDonald's got a job at internship in Electronic Arts Canada, which was in Burnaby. I grew up in Abbotsford, which is about 45 minutes away. And I was like, oh, wait, EA's here? Yeah, it's that close. And I had no idea because I had went to a university for chemistry, so I didn't have engineering. I wasn't an artist. So we heard that there was some QA tester positions opened. And back then, if you knew someone and you put that on the resume, you got in. So that was my start, was a QA tester, 1996. And I joined, and they're like, you're going to be a tester on, I believe it was NBA Live 97 for PC. And then they're like, but we don't have a build for you, so you just need to play Quake for 2 months. And I was like, what? And I felt guilty. I was like, I should train. You're paying me to train. Should I go and get 3D Studio Max? So I asked my boss, I was like, can I use 3D Studio Max, make models or anything while I'm here? He's like, we can't afford that license, so just play Quake. I was like, okay. I got really good. I had a lot of fun. A lot of Team Fortress 1 as well.
Oh my God. Yeah. Very interesting.
So that was the QA start. And then from that point on, worked my way through, I was at EA for 4 years. I actually did a stint leaving the games industry for about 2.5 years, did a bunch of .com startups, moved to Dublin and then back to Canada. And then I got a job at Next Level Games. It was a startup studio that had spun out of Black Box Games as QA manager. And that was really fun because I got to see a startup culture. I got to learn how to build a QA department from scratch. And then I also started dabbling a little bit in like production, like assistant production. I was always begging, can I help here and there? And figure out more about that, which sort of started moving my career into the production angle of the world. Yeah.
And then fast forward perhaps to
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it was production there at Next Level Games. Then I went to Midway, where I started as producer, move way up to exec producer on Blitz Slugfest Loaded and then Blitz League. And then I wanted to move to the West Coast because to work for my dream company, which was Capcom. I was a massive fan back in the day of all the old Capcom games. And Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network had just launched. And so I joined as head of production and then moved my way up to head of product development. So I got to like Greenlight Games, Street Fighter HD Remix, work on that, Puzzle Fighter HD Remix, and then started doing all kinds of remakes, remasters, Bionic Commando Rearmed. And then it taught me a little bit about business development. From there, started my own company for a few years, then went to PlayStation, where I was the head of third-party partnerships. Then on to Iron Galaxy Studios, which was a big co-development studio in Chicago, Orlando, and Nashville. We grew that up to about 300 people. Yeah, and then 8 months ago, decided to start a brand new adventure on the consulting side of things. So very diverse background, but been sort of a lot of different roles in the production and QA background of games and seen a lot of blood, sweat, and tears along the roads for sure.
Can imagine. So how would you describe like your role in the creative process of creating a game, shipping a game?
I mean, I think the first one where I actually had an impact was probably on, well, Slugfest Loaded a little bit. I was more junior at that time, but Blitz the League was a fascinating one because we got to basically, historically, all the licensed games, it was like there was NFL Blitz, which was NFL licensed. There was Madden, right, which obviously had the NFL license. And we got the phone call one day that like EA was probably negotiating for exclusivity. So we sort of went back and we're like, well, what would we do if we didn't have a license? And so we came up with a concept, many amazing designers in the creative team. And they're like, what if we made the game the NFL didn't want you to play? And so being there in that room, that wasn't my idea, but the team had come up with that idea. And then being able to build the whole entire like ecosystem was like, what would that mean for the rules? What would that mean for the players? What would that mean for the locker room? And then of course there was escorts and there was drugs, and we're like, because it's the game the NFL doesn't want, even though all the players were doing this in real life, the NFL never talked about that stuff. So that to me, like the creative inception, being there from day one, sort of to build that narrative. We had one of our designers who wrote 250 years of history for the league, right? In this sort of fictional universe where this had happened. We got Lawrence Taylor on board, and it was really fantastic because empowering each of the teams to be able to create the team characters, the team captains, and the rule set, and okay, what are we gonna do for weather? And then we're like, well, we need really gory injuries because that's part of it. So how are we gonna do that? So we have this zoom in tech that you could see the bone snap and zoom back out. So being able to sort of be part of that creative process from the inception was very, very fun, and taught me so much about constraints. Taught me about at first you start like, what does it look like in the widest viewpoint, and then how do you narrow that down and chunk that out? And so I was in charge of like breaking that into tasks and hovering over each team to make sure everything is being delivered on time and on budget. And that was largely really my first full stop, like from cradle to grave production that I've ever been a part of. But it was super cool and rewarding.
Awesome, cool. And then in your later roles, like for example at Sony or Iron Galaxy, with like a more of a management position.
Yeah.
If like, what's been your creative input in the things that happen there?
Yeah, that's a great question. PlayStation was more like I was part of the third-party content team, so it was more finding the content out there in the world, meeting with developers, hearing their pitches, meeting with publishers, sort of seeing their plans. And it was really challenging because when I started to do business development when I was at Capcom, because I came from QA and no one ever taught me how to do biz dev, my rule was every time I went to meet with the studio, I would have to finish the last game that they shipped before I went there. And I didn't know that was super rare. So I show up at the studio and I know exactly how it was built, like what the game is about. And that sort of allowed me to gain credibility and helped me in the PlayStation job for sure. Iron Galaxy was much different because primarily co-development studio that worked on a lot of different franchises, from Killer Instinct to Tony Hawk 3-4 Remastered, from, League of Legends to Overwatch to Diablo 3. But we also were doing some original stuff. They built Dive Kick, which is an internally developed game. And so we always had, my rule when you have a creative team is I always want us to be trying something new. So we would do pitches, probably about 10 pitches at least, 10 to 20 pitches a year. Just every year, every new show, there's a new pitch from us. My rule is like, if you're pitching for more than 6 months and nobody's buying, it's probably not going to make it. Doesn't mean it's not a good idea. It just means the market isn't there for it. So it's really fun to be part of that creative team to build those pitches. And then Rumbleverse was kind of like Blitz the League again, because from the get-go, we were hanging out. Me and one of my colleagues, Craig Kuyava, came up with that idea because, Fortnite was going to the moon. And of course, knucklehead brain goes, how can we clone Fortnite, but like do a twist that makes it super popular? And we started jamming on, okay, what was Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter? If we go back to that, what was the juxtaposition? What was the photogrammetry in Mortal Kombat? And it was the gore. So we're like, what if we made the goriest battle royale on planet Earth? So we excitedly come up with this idea. We come in to the hotel bar in the Orlando Aloft, and Chelsea and Dave are sitting there. Chelsea, co-CEO with me back then, and Dave was our founder. And we pitched the idea of this gory, you chop people in half, and their whole body splits, and blood splurts everywhere. And Dave Lang's go, that's a fucking terrible idea. And Chelsea just goes, we should do wrestling. And in that moment, at that inception point, what if you could do a elbow drop off a 40-story building? What if you were like basically superheroes wrestling this massive city? And so that was so cool, because from that moment, we just started jamming and throwing ideas down. We're like, what does that look like? What does it look like? What was that? Next morning, I wake up and Craig and I started, working on the design doc or the concept doc. And I run into Dave later on. I was like, dude, we're going to build a pitch. And he just looks at me, he's like, it was a dumb idea. He's like, we were drunk. It's not going to track. And so I almost we started going on that journey to build the pitch, to spite him, to prove him wrong. And I kind of love that about our chemistry, is that he would challenge me. And then instead of shutting down, I was like, I'm going to show you. So then we got some of the creative team involved, and the pitch started to evolve. At first, it was called 1, 2, 3 Wrestle World. And our idea was, you want to hack the algorithm of awareness. So 1 is the first number above the A's through Z's. So 1, 2, 3 Wrestle World will be the number 1. And then we got guys like Adam Hart and Lars DeVore involved, and they started building an animatic. And we ended up building a 45-second animatic. So it was one of those things, we weren't pitching everything else, but this one thing had this kernel of idea, build the animatic. And then it was at the tail end of a meeting. We had 8 minutes left. And I was like, we're also working on something else. And they're like, what is it? And it was 5 slides. It was like a paper pitch, basically. It had the 45 seconds in it. Sure. Put that on, and the publisher goes, holy shit. That's so stupid. It's so awesome. And literally, they were the ones that end up signing it first. But it was to be part of that process. So then that was obviously a 4-year journey, which we can go into all the details you want to, from inception of that concept to it releasing. Yeah, but that was such a fun process.
Yeah, can imagine. But okay, let's stick with that, and because in this particular case, you were actually the guy that came up with the idea, or
no, Kanye was team of it's there was a tub, and then
you got one step down, worked on the GDD.
Yes.
So what happened then? How did you get team alignments on this? Were there any controversies or
Yeah, it was interesting because I had been around a lot of bad leaders in my career. You sort of stack rank throughout your career all the things you don't want to do. We had this concept at Midway that we called the seagull manager, which was swoop in and poop and then fly away, right? And so I was like, can't do that. We have to empower the team to make great decisions. And part of that came with, once we had the tagline, which was, what if you could elbow drop someone off a 40-story building? That was that. I always think that razor, I think EA coined the term the razor or the X, is super important when you're making the game. What is it in a sentence? A lot of people go, it's this meets that. I don't think that's as evocative as with Blitz, it was the game the NFL doesn't want you to play. And everyone can kind of go, oh, damn. Yeah. So then the next step we have to do is build the values. What is this game? And actually, more importantly, what we found as we went on that journey, when you say, what is this game? Each one of those things you say are interpretable. what it isn't is almost more important. So we're like, this is not a fighting game. Because everyone's like, oh, you're building a fighting game. No, this is a party game. It's like an adventure game. This is a platformer more than anything else. So building those two things, and I think building a great game concept and getting people alignment around it is just really spending a ton of time at the start, the inception point, getting all those things. So that way when you replicate it and the team starts to grow, you pledge allegiance to what it is and what it isn't, what the core concept is. And it was really fascinating though, because as it grew, we had a game director, Lars, but it was very organic. It was very communally driven. A lot of ideas like best idea wins, how the combat's going to work, how the rollback code's going to work, and all that different stuff. It was really about empowering them with those values and what it is and what it isn't. And that's what allowed us to grow with that consistency. Now, it also made decisions take longer. Oops. Because it wasn't like, oh, I'm the person that, I'm the one that could overrule you. But that was really important because I think a lot of times I see teams that they're almost like, if you don't spend that time to figure out what it is, what it isn't, and start, then think about you photocopy something and you photocopy it over and over and over and it starts to fray and look sort of, that's sometimes what happens if you don't do a great job of defining. Because be like, well, I heard it was about this. And then they use like, well, I heard from someone else it's actually about that. So how do you follow like regimented ways so you can scale properly?
Yeah. So essentially it's about making everyone understand what the end product is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then allowing for some freedom or a lot of freedom.
Yep.
In that.
Yeah, I think it's about creating I think a lot of people think they want absolute freedom. And in reality, I don't think humans make good decisions when there's infinite choice. I think giving people a play field and then being very clearly defined and deliberate about what the play field rules are within that pack, and then giving freedom within that play field.
Yeah.
That was really, really important. And that, so was we kind of knew what we were making, but we didn't know we knew it was going to be 40 player, online, top of the pops, sort of multiplayer, crazy combat action. We wanted to be, one of the values that we had was we wanted to be as fun to watch as it was to play. And then you start making different decisions because now you're like, it's just not about the freneticism, but you want to feel things as you watch it.
Yeah.
We want to make it as fun to lose as it is to win. And you're like, how do you do that? Well, you make it hilarious. And so those things start to reverberate. And then having a great checks and balances where playable builds, we're having playtests twice a week, which I think a lot of teams, lose sight of sometimes. They sort of go away and they're not engaging. Now it's like, if we're playing together, we're seeing the problems, we're seeing the innovation and evolution. But that also keeps the team on track. So you can see, hey, why isn't this part of the level done? And sometimes the peer pressure machine works better than like me going like, hey, are you on track?
Yeah. All right. Did you specifically do any kind of ritual process, anything else to make sure there was like also alignment between like departments, art design, production, even marketing, stuff like that?
Yeah, it was interesting because we, we had our first publisher that we had signed with. So the first year of development was with one publisher, and then the project actually canceled. So about, vertical slice phase of the game, we got informed that the publisher was going to walk away. And we're like, holy crap. So, and it was still called WrestleWorld at the time with the first publisher. So obviously you got to deal with that. That's a whole entire, we could talk about the whole product. That's a different podcast. But how do you break the news to people? How do you manage them through change and heartbreak and feelings? But the cool part about it is they gave it all back to us and they just wrote down the losses. And now we had what I thought was the greatest playable demo of all time because we had a 40 player battle royale. I mean, again, VS, but that looked great, played great, all that stuff. So we just sort of did the rounds with publishers. And nowadays, unfortunately, I think you have to almost get to that level on your own. But now they also want like wish list numbers and all those other things right now. But we had that. And so we proven the tech, we proven to play the moment to moment. And then it was relatively easy. We had a lot of awesome interest. And that's when Epic Games signed up. And we actually took the time at that point, because I think sometimes you go through a change in a project where we're like, well, is wrestling what this is about? Like wrestling is a very Western concept and Japanese, but sure, like they love it too. And Mexico, it's also big there, different regions within the world. Or is it bigger? And that was actually a great challenge that Epic sort of put to us is like, is wrestling sort of like putting us in a box? And so we actually changed it from WrestleWorld to Rumbleverse. We changed the code name. we almost like redid all our values, rechecked them all. Like, is this what we want to do? So having that alignment with the team, and the team changed. So the team that was on the first one on Wrestle World wasn't all the team, because we were a co-dev studio. We spent whatever 9 months trying to get the new deals. Your team changes over. And so rebuilding and getting new buy-in, I think, for everyone on the new vision was super important. So the rituals are really around, each of the departments had their own sort of check-ins and reviews, but the play test is sort of when we came together as a studio to really sort of see each other's work. So each of the groups had their different ways about it. And then we started doing play tests with, of course, the Epic crew as well. And that was fun, because I was like, okay, don't be too hard on them. Because they were just like, our team everyone loved to just try to win at any cost. And I was like, hey, I'm angry, maybe, which is a good test, actually, because you feel like what an end user might feel like.
Yeah. To allow them to win at least once.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So, but in general, in your experience, what do you think about like really strong individual creative vision versus team alignment? Because in this case, it sounded like there was a lot of like team alignment, and it was all, but not by committee, but it was.
I didn't know, that kind of was. It was, and it was a decision we made. Like, it was a community built game, and it's hard for me, who's seen both sides. Like, I really thought at Midway on Blitz, the league, we were strong. Like, we had sort of the 6 leads of the vision, but like the game, the NFL is only you play, and then you build scope, and then you kind of go. Again, because it was strong values at the start, you're able to give that freedom. But I've seen teams where they need that 1-0 tour that's like, to go this way, then we're gonna do this. And at Midway, that was what it was like. Ed Boon is a genius. What Ed Boon says goes, and he doesn't rule like that. But a lot of the old school people that were making the arcade games like NFL Blitz and NBA Jam and stuff like that, it was very much like, do exactly, they're handcrafted. Now we're gonna do this, because the teams are small, 8 people, 10 people. So transitioning from a director driven, this is the vision, this is how it is, I'm David Lynch, you're gonna do everything I say, to what do you all think? How are we going? Was really fascinating. I think unpacking the impact of if something becomes popular. I remember one specific situation where the community-driven approach, the sort of collective approach, didn't do us a service, which was, we had fall damage from about 2/3 of the game development. We had fall damage. So if you pulled off a move on a 40-story building and you miss the other character and you landed on the ground, you lose like 20% of your health. And it never felt right to some of us. We're like, that feels weird. And so the team was like, but you need risk reward. That's how it works. You need, very academic. And I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to the professionals. And then we started doing play tests, and the feedback was like, ugh, that doesn't feel good. And the more play tests we did, it was like, ugh. So finally went back and said, hey, this isn't working. So the team jammed for like a long time, months and months. What is the right way? We end up swapping over to, you lose your stamina. And everything, all the pain went away.
Okay.
But it was a 6-month process of like trial and error and all that stuff. So you look back and you go, if we would have been declarative and said, take it out and flip it that way, we would have saved 6 months. But I think we would have eroded the trust.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you're declarative with a team that almost needs to discover. So I look back, I'm like, yeah, maybe the game could have, taken 20% less time. But in the end, the feeling of it. Because even the credits, our philosophy at Iron Galaxy is every single person at the studio is in the credits. And everyone that was in the studio the whole entire journey, even if they left. We don't do titles, so it's just all of it. Because everyone has some contribution in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And that was really, really vibrant and made the game, for us, so much fun. And when fans connected with it, a lot of fun. And then, the commercial realities, it comes out, 10 million downloads, which is great. Amazing daily active users. We have like 200,000 daily active users. But then it's all monetizing. So then getting that phone call of like, it's no longer going to go forward with a team that sort of built up. But yeah, it was really fascinating for me because I'd seen both worlds of the linear director auteur driven. And then this collective was kind of a new school approach that can sometimes be a bit unwieldy.
Yeah, can imagine. So you're not like a traditional creative, if you look at like, artist, maybe designer.
Yeah.
But from your perspective, like, what's the definition, or how would you define or describe a creative collaboration?
I mean, to me, it's creating space for to discover happy accidents, to go on a journey, to trust each other. I think we kind of have a rule that no blame storming. We don't want people to, like, just throw stuff at the wall. No bad ideas. Just to throw it out there, because I think sometimes people get in this world of like, I want to be approved. I want to be, I want to be accepted. And I think with a truly collaborative, creative approach, it's more about let's explore, let's go on a journey, right? Let's try things, throw stuff at the wall, see what happens, put it in there. Um, Very early on in my career, I met this boss, and he was doing a big, huge organizational change in the company, and we were all rejecting it. We're like, hate that. I think sometimes this happens in game development as well. And he came in one morning, he said, hey, listen, remember that wool sweater that your grandma got you or maybe knit you when you were a kid? I want you to just put this change on every day for 30 days and pretend like it's from your grandma. Pretend like you love it. And just go through that concept.
Yeah.
And I think you start to realize that when you just try it on, okay. It's kind of like whenever you came up with a game name, like naming a game is one of the hardest, challenging things you could ever possibly do, because you fall in love with that idea, and then your bias starts to sort of create almost like a hard shell around it. I'm like, now that's the only Nezukozi in this. Yeah, I think sometimes that happens with game design and creative collaboration. I think if there's too much, it's my way or the highway, right? I think that's where it can get difficult, unless that was defined from the start. I think when people get attracted to games or game studios to work on a project, I think you really have to understand the architecture of the team and how it's going to be run, and then sort of basically like pledge allegiance to that process and give yourself completely. Because I do see space for both types of game development, but I think to be collaborative is to understand where the buck stops, and also that in the end we have to make money, we have to ship this stuff on time. It's not just sort of kumbaya. So it's a push-pull, right? I think it's a marriage or a great relationship where it's like not always easy. I mean, it's very rarely, a game dev is very rarely easy, yeah. But that push-pull is that creative collaboration where you give space for each other to explore, to try things, and not feel punitive or angry if it fails. Just like you put something together. I think one of the most fascinating things that people ask me often these days, like, all that game, they totally, knew it was going to fail. I'm like, no one makes a game to fail. Everyone makes a game that wants to connect, that they can connect with someone. And so if it doesn't fit, it's okay. So yeah, it's about creating that space.
Okay, cool. And then sort of coming back to one of the things you said, how early in the creative process of making or shipping a game do you think you should be letting the commercial voices in, if you will? It can be marketing management, community, maybe, I don't know.
I love that. That's a great question. Because it's about buy-in, right? I've done some sneaky stuff in my career where we had a bunch of game design concepts and we would go to a meal with someone in the leadership team, on the commercial side of things, and we'd seed some of the ideas. And then, next, a month later, they'd be like, hey, I've been thinking, maybe we should do what? That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
We should, let's jam on that. And all of a sudden it's in, and now they're like, I'm going to greenlight this till the end of time. This is the greatest idea. This game is amazing. And so I know it feels maybe a little bit, a little bit hacky, but I personally think the earlier the better. I think there's a lot of disrespect in the games industry for non-game developers or non-game makers, right? There's like, oh, they don't know how to do this but also you don't know how to market, right? Like you don't know how to raise money. You don't know how to do those other things. And so the more we create space and understanding, the better off we're going to be. Too many times I think people approach it competitively. Like, well, what exactly are you going to do? Because I think we should use this influencer, like based on what research, based on what your kids watched last night, Yeah. So I personally, as early as humanly possible, but as long as they understand, that they're there for awareness and context. Because the more context you give them, the more access you give them, as long as you constrain, right, their input, I think the better off it could be in the end.
Yeah. Do you also think those guys or, commercial voices could be more, let's say marketing, that sure could also contribute to the creative process, like literally?
Yeah, I think so. I think it really depends on like how much, if you want to go multitudinal of like, oh, what kind of IP, if we're to like, let's say do an IP integration, they might have some great metrics. I might really like, this is a great example. Like when I was at Capcom, one of my favorite games back in the arcades was Black Tiger, really obscure game from Capcom. And so I kept trying to reboot Black Tiger, and it was like, no one likes this. And I was like, I think they do. So we finally did a survey and put up 100 IPs from Capcom, and it was number 87. I was like, we'll never make a reboot of this. And I think sometimes as a player and as a developer, you have implicit bias and stuff that you like. And sometimes I think marketers can come in and have some cool ideas that, but again, as long as you constrain it, they understand it. I think getting bought in, especially maturity over time and wisdom grows, so they don't think that they have full access to it. But I think sometimes those last minute ideas, like I remember actually a great example was Blitz League. We weren't going to announce it at all. We were like, obviously had this announced plan where we're announcing months before, we're going to trail all stuff. And then Madden announced the exclusive 10-year contract with the NFL. And it was Steve Allison, actually, who's at Epic now. He's our head of marketing. And he comes in, he's like, I think we should announce right now. And none of us were thinking that. Because we're like, we have a plan, we're going to announce in 6 months, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, we should announce right now.
Yeah.
Right? And he had that because he knew the articles, the press would go crazy, the trade would go crazy. And it was our opportunity to, in every single article that talked about the exclusive 10-year deal, talked about Blitz League.
Yeah.
Because the only unlicensed football game was ours. And I was like, as a developer, never would have thought.
No, someone with a New York City ground.
Yeah. And that was transformative. I mean, the game ended up doing extraordinarily well. I think a big contributing factor because of that decision.
Cool. So have you ever been in a situation where team members like strongly disagreed, either like strategically or creatively?
Yes.
And like, how did you approach that essentially?
Man, that is
Pick one.
Yeah, that's a complicated question. Yeah, sometimes it's been with a feature, right, that they're madly in love with. And again, it goes back to, we did a lot of sort of pod developments where we have pods working on different things. And if they believe very deeply in something. And so it becomes difficult because you're trying to create cohesion with the team. But if one group thinks that like, well, my idea, this is going to be the idea. And you start to realize, okay, is it ego? Is it just because he worked on it? Is it just like it's definitely like an echo chamber approach sometimes. And sometimes it can get ugly, right? Where they start to be like, well, they're not taking my advice. So, I might sort of start to poison the well, right? So I see situations where that well starts to get poisoned and you start to see that spread. And you're like, well, we want everyone to be included. We want everyone to be heard. But now this is getting problematic. And so, I can remember a situation where we had to take, we basically had to take that pod and analyze that pod. And it turned out that, the lead in that group was like, oh, challenging in different ways. And so making those changes, so like for the cohesion of the project, because I think, my old boss used to have the saying, nobody's bigger than the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on a game team, no one person's bigger than the vision and the mission. So as soon as people start to sort of catch that feeling that like, I'm going to my way, it's like, no, we're all part of a journey together. It's like, I grew up in BC, Canada, dragon boating, right? All 20 of you are rowing together.
Yeah.
And the moment that someone starts to go the other direction or is out of sync, we're not making progress. And so that's, I think you have to deal with it fast and furious. And if not, then if that sort of poison enters the water stream and water supply, then other things start to happen over time. And that's can be problematic. I've had other projects too. I remember one, this is wild, where a designer and a programmer hated each other. Okay. It was, and so what they would do, okay, I've never told this story before. So the programmer would do his work and then check it all in. And then the designer would come the next day, do all of his work, check it in. And then the programmer would go in and change all the stuff the designer checked in and check it out. Like basically revert it.
Mm-hmm.
So, because you, I guess, figured out the password of the designer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I didn't, by the way, I didn't know for weeks this has happened. The designer would go in then and figure out how to log in as the engineer. And then for weeks, they were basically undoing each other's work. Like the most passive aggressive civil war I've ever seen in my life. And so when that happened, we're like, what is going on? You realize, well, I don't like the way that they do this or that. You're like, what are we doing? We're just burning time, burning money, and everyone loses. Everyone on the team loses because of your too little few.
Yeah, you have the fight here and it fights everyone.
Yeah, it's a little bit of ego. It's that ego that sort of like sets in and like, well, my idea is better. It goes back again. Nobody's bigger than the project. And so that was super fascinating. We finally were able to like, hey, let's do a peace offering.
So you dealt with the situation rather than like removing the problem.
Yeah, that one was different than the other one. That one was like, hey, we have to have a real talk. Like, what are we trying to do? Unpack that. And there's a lot of layers, obviously, but they were able to work well together. I think many teams do as soon as they understand what's happening here and how off the rails it can get, and the fact that everyone else is seeing it.
Yeah.
Kind of like a lot of people, think that, oh, my kids aren't noticing that, the parents are fighting.
Oh, no.
They 100% know. And see, with a team, the dynamics, the feeling, the vibe, I think with game development, it's very important to have that sort of like crystal sort of not clear, because it's always going to be sort of like a little bit of agita is going to be good. But for everyone to feel the consistency so that way they can feel stable and make the best decisions possible.
Cool. Have you personally ever had to kill a darling? Like,
100%.
had an idea?
Oh, yeah, all the time. So many things. And it was actually, I remember, I can't say the type of game because I think, but when I joined Iron Galaxy, I had this pitch idea. I was percolating. VR was growing a bit right now at the time. And so I sort of pitched it to our creative team, and they're like, oh, that's cool. Let's build pitch. So we built a pitch deck, and at the time, there was really only like a handful of people that would fund VR games. And so we did those 6 meetings, and they all said no. And the next company meeting, I was like, that project is dead. And people were like, but that was your idea. I'm like, and I think doing that public sacrifice.
Yeah.
And we actually made it sort of we made it part of the story at Iron Galaxy, where every 6 months or so, we would have an hour-long presentation called Pitch Cemetery. We would show all the pitches, because a lot of people don't see the pitches that you go out with.
Yeah.
And part of it was like, what did we learn? Right?
Yeah.
Why did it fail?
Cross-born on
a thing that never had to be. Because what we used to do is like fun prototypes, and then we started just doing paper pitches, because I feel like getting that creative juices going. Can you, and also I think people, when I first joined there, I think people were like, it's just the fighting game studio. I'm like, it's so much more.
Yeah.
People had never seen that before. In the end, they ended up working on from MOBAs to shooters to, sports and action games all through in between. So it's kind of about showing that. But I think it's very important for leaders to not be precious. And I know many other people at many studios that are like, well, my idea, I've been pitching for 3 years, and they just haven't signed it yet. But I'm like, I don't think it's going to be signed in Trey.
Might not happen.
Yeah.
It's going to the cemetery.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned one example of like a ritual process or something else. What other things do you prefer, like, have done in the past where you think this is the best in terms of like, but again, making sure everyone's aligned?
Yeah.
Could be stand-ups, could be tools.
Big fan of stand-ups, but with a caveat. I love dailies. When you're making the game, like when you're on the game team, I think having daily meetings, it's just a quick meeting, 30 minutes, sync. What'd you do? What'd you get done yesterday? What are you working on today? What's blocking you? And that's it. Person to person. Yeah, very classic. Because then it's like it's a heartbeat. It's a check-in. Those are my favorites. I also think it's important to have deeper one-on-ones, obviously, with the team members and see how they're feeling. And that was, again, at Iron Galaxy, my role as more as co-CEO was like to check in on the overall vibe of the company, but going in deeply to each of the team members. And then what I started to realize is that sometimes people, the analogy we started to use was sometimes when leaders get involved, things get messy. And the analogy we started to use is like, okay, we have the boat on the top of the water. Every time any one of the 3 of us put on the scuba gear and go in the water, there's dirt and fossils, crap everywhere, and blood and fish, and we're trying to stay in the boat. And not to say that we don't want to do hard work, but it's like we want everyone to be empowered to have autonomy within their realm and region. And so what we started to realize that people kept coming for solutions. Hey, what should I do about this? What should I do? So I read, actually, I can't remember the name of the book, but it was this really amazing process, which is called 131. And now I use it religiously. And what it means is that when you bring one problem to your boss or to your team, you also bring 3 solutions and then your recommendation.
Yeah.
So that way they can authenticate your thought process. They can give you feedback on that decision and then tweak it if you need to. So I stopped taking any meetings where people are like, I want to talk about this problem. I was like 131. And it's goofy because like anytime you say like acronyms or that stuff, but it started to work because now everyone's thinking about problem solving. Now everyone's thinking about, I don't want to bring them problems. I want to bring them solutions. And by the way, it's super empowering because then you come in the recommendation, I'm like, that's a great idea. I love it. Go with the one that you said. And if it ever is wrong or needs some tweaking, like, talk to me about the intentionality or why you think that would create the best outcome. And then going back to that, then you're like, maybe some little tweaks that come back to me. And that was massively powerful because I think the group dynamic of like dailies are great for check-in. It's a vibe check, but then that gives you a deeper understanding of like, hey, so then they start to solve more problems, and then you're making less decisions because I think leaders are only, they have a limited amount of decisions they should be making per day.
Yeah. No, it's cool. It reminds me, and I might like paraphrase this way too much, but like when an ad agency is trying to sell a concept to a customer, essentially you make the one that you want to do and 2 shitty ones. So what it sounds to me like is that after a while, I'll come to you with a problem and 3 solutions, but I already sort of know what I want to do. So I already sort of made the decision.
Right.
And that sort of fixes that.
Yeah, because then you're empowering them to be like, oh, I want to bring them. I always think about, I grew up in Canada, so grew up hunting. And I was thinking about bringing home that duck or that rabbit or the deer to the family, right? And especially in the sort of boss and subordinate relationship. When you start thinking, when you're working with partners and you're working with teams, how can we make you look good? So you bring that roast turkey home, and that's exactly what it is. Because then you're like, oh, the more I think I could do it on my own, and the more I don't need your guide. I want guidance, but guidance should be more like mentorship versus like, what about this? What about that? I think too many bad managers get stuck in the, well, I need to show my value, so I'm going to tell you what I feel every time.
Yeah.
And what you're actually doing is you're destroying productivity, you're destroying trust, you're slowing down the process, and you're building a non-scalable organization. Because everyone's like the one, if that boss is the one-stop shop, who could shut anything down? You're like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And then people start to feel bad. And that's so again, when the vibe starts to get weird. And I think a lot of bigger companies have that, where you have that one group or one leader that just isn't working. And so how do you empower the team?
Yeah.
You want to make them look good. You want them to make you, but like, it's really about cohesion.
Yeah. Cool. So what about remote work and collaborative efforts?
Yes. That's really fascinating. I think the challenge is that if you were built in a world where you were in-person collaborators from the beginning, right, which is the vast majority of people in our age range, it's difficult, I think, to change. It's old dog, new tricks. So, and some of the things I think that became challenging with the transition to remote was really about juniors, right? When a junior person joins a team, I remember scenes of like we have the 3 new engineers or the 3 new artists, and then you have the senior artists checking in with them, looking over the shoulder, how you doing? I think humans don't ask for help naturally, right? Humans want to be, I got this, don't have to. And so when you think about a remote situation, am I going to ping you on Slack and be like, hey, I really need your help, and I'm going to do that 5 times a day? No. If I was in person, can you check this out? Do you mind? Just 2 seconds. Feels good, but like animation. So again, cohesion for that type. But the new studios that are being born in remote, I think, are finding ways to replicate that. It feels different, but the results, I think, can be relatively similar. As long as the expectations are set and there's radical candor and we're being honest with each other. I think what's fascinating to me is I have a lot of friends in the industry that are like, it's only this. It could only be in person or a hybrid where it's like half in person, half home, or half remote, or it's only remote. Yeah, it's like different strokes for different folks. Yeah. Each of them can work. Now, what's the future of it? Who can say, right? I think Distributed development now is obviously here to stay. I think the future of this industry is fractional and modular, and we're going to be working with lots of teams. If you look at credits lists of many games now, there's hundreds sometimes of companies that they've tapped into.
Yeah, the Hollywood model.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not all in the same sort of physical space. So it has trade-offs, and people have preferences. And I think find places that resonate with your style. We got a lot of indoor cats in this industry, and we got a lot of outdoor cats in this industry. So if you are an outdoor cat, you need that vibe, find a team or a company that is like mine.
Okay. And what area do you think is the biggest problem? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a lot of people talk about like a created part, or especially initially would be the place where you actually like, fuck, we need to be in the same room for this. What do you think?
Well, conflict for sure. When there's conflict or disagreement, or how do you create alignment? One of my favorite studios in the world, IDOS Montreal, has this phenomenal process where what they do is at the very, very, very beginning. I know this is sort of, I'm not telling stories because I've talked about it before. They basically have a lock-in. They have a 6-month process where 6 of the leads get in that room, and they're out there 24/7. But there's like, they're in there, and they just have basically like, a whiteboard that surrounds the whole room, and they're not leaving until the game concept is complete. So the conflict, the jamming, the creative stuff is compartmentalized to that time and that place and that package. So after that, it's a lot more clear of what we have to do. I think if you weren't in person for that, I think it would be more challenging. So for me, it's more design, feel, vibe, fun loops, play loops. Like when you're not together to like, okay, pass control it back forward. Again, it's still possible.
Yeah.
I think you can go further faster when it's like, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about that? Versus sort of the linearity of like, I did my work, I checked it in. What do you think? Right. That's very sort of serial, right? Versus running in parallel, I think, when you're in person. And the other part that I think in person is really important for too is conflict resolution. So if you and I are frustrated at each other because you just like tone on text is like really sort of nasty and making me feel bad. I'm like, when we were in person, we could go for lunch. Be like, hey, what's up? What's up, Captain Aggro? And yet, and remote though, that builds. And then you have to take that to maybe your spouse and talk about it. Versus like in an in-person environment, you have ways in which you can release the steam and you can sort of deal with those conflicts. So I think that I worry about long-term impact of mental health and how it's going to basically, do then those problems and those conflicts just like, do they marinate and then you take that out in relationships? I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but I know that from my perspective, if there's problems and we deal with it, the spirit's better.
Yeah.
Feel sort of more connected.
Yeah. So I guess we're designed to read facial expressions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And text isn't the same thing. And
it's interesting. I find that I can have more intimate conversations on the phone instead of over Zoom, even though I'm seeing your face, because it harkens back to a time when, I remember calling a girl that I really liked on a landline and talking to her and allows us freedom. Whereas I think on Zoom, sometimes we have to be performative a bit,
Yeah.
You're smiling, you're looking straight at the camera, versus, hey, I just want to chat. How you doing? It's hard to look at a person and go, how you doing? Versus on that phone, like,
Yeah.
how you feel these days,
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So any other like tough lessons or mistakes from your long career that comes to mind where?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, obviously the ones we run was transformative for me from a process perspective. It's interesting. I think there's a new phrase that's been going around, which is called "let them." But what I thought about a lot is, when there's conflict and when there's things happening around you in the world or on a project, and you start to get stressed out, you're sort of letting that happen to you, right? I luckily started working with a coach very early in my career, about halfway through my career, and she taught me an amazing amount of stuff about myself and about solving problems and so yeah. And the biggest thing she learned is like, right now you're in the river and you're feeling the current. She's like, you're letting yourself feel the current. I'm like, what is this Zen bullshit, right? And she's like, you're actually the river's there, but you can stand on the bridge. And then you don't have to get, like, you don't have to let it impact. You're giving it caloric impact on your life, and you don't have to. And as soon as you start to realize that you can pick and choose those things, all of a sudden you can like live a little bit. Oh, and then the other part actually that I learned was how you communicate when you do have conflict is critically important. So she taught me this phrase, which is, oftentimes like, you were an asshole yesterday, or you made me feel like shit.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, what? What automatically, like, I didn't know. There's no way.
That's not me.
I would never do that.
I don't do that.
That's never happened at the Marriott lobby at Gamescom. Instead, she taught me, hey, Martin, the other day when you said that, the environment I was working on looked like junk, like hot AI slob, it made me feel like you don't appreciate me as a partner, And I know it sounds very therapy based, but like now I'm talking about the thing you said, and I'm telling you the intentionality and the context in which I received it. So now I'm not attacking you. Say, I felt this.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help? And you might be like, I meant because I'm not happy with the quality of it. And it's like, cool, now we can work through this. But it's no longer an accusation.
Mm-hmm.
You made me feel. No, I made me feel.
Yeah.
Because I interpreted.
Exactly.
It's like interpretation and context to me are two things that I think are woefully under-focused on in our industry. Because I apply intentionality to your words, and then I get feelings. And you're like, I didn't mean any of that. And especially through cultures, right? I mean, cultural differences are massive. And so why you're assigning intentionality, but as soon as you use that verbiage, when you said this, it made me feel that. Now we get to decouple those things and we can have a real conversation. And I think that sort of breeds authenticity, honesty, and this amazing connection you can have with your team members. So it's not about the ego. I think as soon as you just evaporate the ego out of the room in the conversation, life gets better and easier. Because you're not worried about, well, I got to be the boss or I got to do this. You're like, doesn't matter.
That's cool. Okay, so you mentioned, different cultures, people coming from different countries. Obviously, this industry is that.
Yes, it is.
Melting pot of everyone. So how in your career, like how have you handled that? Is it by, here's our corporate culture, and then after a while, everyone sort of gets it? Or anything else that comes to mind?
Well, I kind of see it as there's three different buckets. Bucket one is company culture, right? When I was at PlayStation, I got to work with all of the publishers. And so I actually built a character sheet for each publisher of like, what are the characteristics of each of the, what are the commonalities between the leadership team? And when they have new hires, can I predict how fast they can conform to that? So there's that part. Then the second part is where they came from. And not just like stereotypical stuff about, what country it was, but also, what their background is, because all those things can be different. And the third is also age, right? Age and stage of where you are in your career, and giving space for, people. It's easy to be like, oh, kids these days. Wow. You're like, well, why are they the way they are? If we start to understand and build more compassion, empathy for those different perspectives, I think we too quickly as society want to put people in those buckets. Oh, they work at that place. So you know what they're like. Well, but they work at that place and they're also this age group, and also their background is this, or they were born here, right? Which might be helpful to allow more context for their intentionality. But I think it's really about the understanding the human emotion, and then basically try to build bridges, right? Like, okay, if I think enough about them, maybe this. And by the way, my assumptions could be way off. They might be the one that doesn't act like everyone else.
Yeah.
They might be the outlier that I just don't put in that box. And so it's about managing each person individually. And I think it goes back to also your intentions. One of my bosses once taught me is like, the most important thing is to find out how that other person gets their bonus, right? Which is a very American capitalistic sort of concept, but it's more of like, how do they achieve success?
Yeah.
How do they measure success? If they have KPIs, what are they? And then how can I just be not beholden to you, but like serve you in getting you there? Because now you look great. I was on a call recently with a younger person in the industry that's about 5 years in, and they were saying how they just they want to move up. I was like, well, why do you want? to move up? Like, what's the reason why you're doing it? Because I want control. I want to be in control. I'm like, let's unpack that. What's the part of the control that's important? Well, influence. I said, okay, you can do that right now. Because they were talking about how their boss is kind of a jerk, and they would just want to replace their boss. I'll be a better boss. I was like, what if you made your boss look really good? Just kept making them look good. Is that influence? And they were like, absolutely. I'm like, yeah, that's like passive control.
Yeah.
So your hands are not on the wheel, but you know exactly where we're going, right? And so sometimes we're just so focused on the outcome, which I want to be in control, when in reality, we have that input to do it. So they sort of going across the cultures is really about understanding where they came from. I do a lot of traveling. I get to meet a ton of studios all around the world. And I start to build like a character sheet for, oh, I'm in this town, right? There's consistency sometimes. You know, I was in Poland and go to Warsaw, go to Krakow. So, I start to see. And then I check with them. I'm like, do you feel like there's a consistent this or that? And then they'll you know, especially like I think Eastern Europe in general, what I find with a lot of Western, like people from the US that come over, they're like, why are they so stoic? I'm like, 100 years plus of conflict.
Yeah.
It's just been fighting for 100 years. We've been over there like, pretty good, right? So understanding why they think, how they might be thinking. So you create space for compassion, empathy. And that's, I think, how we can just get further faster, because then we don't get confused about sort of the falling the chasms. You know, there's been recent situations where some companies have decided to go very public with conflict. And I'm like, some of that is cultural. Some of that is sort of like who they are, what it means to them. And so I think creating space for that. So you can, instead of being like, well, this must be because of that. You know, well, what if it was because there were some feelings and stuff like that? So I think mutual understanding, trying to do your best to really understand who the other person is, and that just creates more team cohesion.
Okay. And since you talked a little bit about it, what about a piece of advice for someone just joining the industry or want to join the industry on the topic of like, how do you collaborate with others across departments and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think it's really important about asking them their questions. So like, what are your goals? Like making it not about you, you know, making about the person that you're talking to. So for young students, for example, a lot of advice I give, which is if you find people that are more senior in the industry and you want to get their feedback, right? Oftentimes people are like, can you look at my portfolio? And that's tough because you're starting with a task. Do me this favor. Instead, I think if you acknowledge their journey, hey, Mark, you've got an awesome background. You've done this, you've done that, you've exited that. Must have been a ton of challenge along that journey. I'd love to grab 15 minutes time and hear about how you navigated your journey. You're like, they did some homework and
Want me to talk about myself?
right. I'm in. And then when they're there, then they can glean some of that feedback, right? Without saying, they often put the onus of like, I need your help.
Yeah.
Right. And help, I think, is a triggering word for humans as well. Like when we hear it, well, oh, okay, but it's really difficult for us to say that. So if you say advice is a different form of help, but you're still asking for help in a different way. The key is though, I want to give you something in return. So paying that forward and creating that sort of karmic energy flow, that Katamari Damacy of karmic energy, I think is important.
Do you have any like outside work, hobbies, or anything else that you think have helped you? Let's say again in a collaborative fashion, like, I don't know, military service, playing sports, playing RPGs.
Yeah, big MMO nerd. I was a big MMO nerd growing up, so did a lot of that. That was great about getting friends together. I love cooking. Cooking is my creative outlet. I love. I've been going to studios and
kid, yeah.
pancakes are not like, that's not a culinary achievement. Putting powder and water mixed together on a griddle, but it brings people together. I love trying new things and challenging myself. And that's also like, hey, what do you think? And getting feedback and being very sort of self-aware is really, really important. Yeah. And I just think, the games industry to me is it's not just about the video games, it's about the people. Right. And so I just love being around the people in this industry and seeing how we can help.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here. And we're about to get to the end, because it's Gamescom and you got other meetings and stuff. Before you leave, who else would you like to see on the podcast?
Who else would I love to see on the podcast explore this stuff? Oh man, there's so many great people. You know what? Actually, I would love to you throw on the other foot is Alex Seropian has the Fourth Curtain podcast, and he does a great job asking everyone else about their jobs and their journeys. But I'd love for you to have Seropian sitting here to talk about his journey, so you can basically flip the script and switch the seats.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Thanks. No guarantees, but I'll reach out.
we'll see if we can land enough.
That would be cool. And then final question, or where can people read more about what you do? No.
Yeah, you can hit us up on our website, vivrato.com, Vivrato.com. We're a video game consultancy that helps all kinds of companies from developers, publishers, platforms, investors, middleware companies to sort of navigate the crazy waters that we're going through. So you go on the website or also on LinkedIn, Attaboys. You can book some time to chat as well through there or send me a DM. I'm pretty responsive. Takes me sometimes some time, but I try to get through all of them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll put the links in the show notes as well. So
Cool.
thanks, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, Aussies. All right.
All right. Take care.
See ya.